In the lab, Neil watches Professor Shawson fixing Repti. Neil suggested to take Repti outside, giving him some exercise, so Shawson agreed and advised to be careful. Later on in the day, Neil and Repti make their way down to London. Neil said, "You could come with me to Geek Retreat. Don't worry, no one will hurt you." So they both entered Geek Retreat building. Joined with Jed, Quinn and Jodie, the group got Dungeons & Dragons board game ready. Repti scanned it and commented, "D&D stands for Dungeons & Dragons, a fantasy RPG also known as role-playing game where players work together to complete quests, search for treasure, and battle monsters in that world." Neil replied, "We know how the game works, Repti." Jed said, "Hey Repti, didn't expect you to turn up." Repti said, "Neil invited me. Nice to see you again. You're Jodie August. Of course we met at the field, before facing Kevnock. And who's he?" Neil said, "This is Quinn Baker." Quinn said, "Hi Repti, also I'm not he, I'm they. I'm classed as non-binary." Repti said, "Apologies. Who's going first?" Neil said, "I'll get some chocolate milkshake. Anyone want anything?" Jodie wanted strawberry milkshake, Quinn wanted hot chocolate with cherry syrup, and Jed wanted a bottle of Coke. So Neil went to the counter, and Repti said, "I hope you don't mind me joining." Quinn said, "Doesn't matter what you are. Being who you are is the main thing. Everyone's welcome." Neil came back with chocolate milkshake, strawberry milkshake, bottle of Coca-Cola, and hot chocolate to the table. So Neil asked, "Any story we can come up with?" Jodie replied, "I was thinking in this game, I live in a small village. My childhood friend will possibly be called Leroy, moved away in south about a couple of months ago. Not so far away, so I'd love to get there." So Quinn added, "Battle the goblins on your way there." Meanwhile, Professor Shawson is working in her lab. The laser beam from Multiverse Manipulator fired. Shawson stopped what she was doing and looked. Suddenly, a man wearing mostly green Mandalorian armor with a Z6 jetpack, and he carries EE3 carbon rifle. The man revealed to be Boba Fett from Star Wars Expanded Universe. So Boba turned around to Shawson and confrontedly asked, "What's happened here? Where am I?" Shawson nervously said, "You've walked through the portal to another universe. You're in London, on planet Earth." Boba asked, "Who's responsible?" So then Boba walked towards the computer and sees Repti on screen. So then he asked, "Where is that droid serpent?" Shawson replied, "I don't know." Boba fired his blaster, laser shot next to Shawson. Then she played dead. Boba stormed out the building. Back at Geek Retreat, Neil said, "Roll a d20. As 2 dices roll, Jodie said, "I've got 12, so this goblin reaches for the bow, but I'm faster." Suddenly, people outside are panicking. One of the staff looked outside. Neil asked, "What's happened, Carl?" So a staff called Carl turned around and said, "Apparently someone placed a bomb inside a co-op opposite us." Neil followed Repti out of Geek Retreat, while Carl looked and said, "He looks pretty cool." There's 2 police cars parked outside, with Rick and Mr. Downing guarding the building. Neil said, "We need to distract those policemen in order to defuse the bomb." Quinn said, "Leave it to me." So Quinn came up to both policemen and asked, "What's happening with the shop?" Rick asked, "What's that got to do with you?" Mr. Downing said, "It's alright to answer that question. While I was in the food store and Rick just went patrolling, someone placed a bomb inside a co-op. I don't know who, but we're finding out." Neil and Repti got inside the co-op while being watched by Boba Fett, who's standing on the roof of Geek Retreat. Neil and Repti ran upstairs and found a bomb inside a room. Neil asked, "How do I defuse it?" Repti replied, "There's an E button for a default. Press it." Neil asked, "Are you sure?" Repti said, "Acceptable." So Neil was scared to press it, but he did. The bomb has turned off, and the shop is saved. After Neil and Repti got out the shop, Rick snarlingly asked, "What were you doing in there?" Repti replied, "We defused the bomb. The street is saved." So everyone clapped and cheered at Neil and Repty. Mr. Downing thought, "Incredible." Jodie gave Neil a kiss on the cheek. Suddenly, he's got a phone call, so he picked up his phone, and after he hung up, he said, "Repty, we have to go back to the lab. Professor Shawson needs us, urgently." Boba Fett flies around in London with his jetpack, staying hidden. Later on, Neil, Repty, Cypher and Holly are inside the lab with Professor Shawson, learning what happened. Holly said, "So this Boba Fett got out the Star Wars universe looking for Repty because he thinks he brought him here." Neil said, "The point is, he didn't." Holly asked, "Who's Boba Fett?" "Sorry, I was never a Star Wars fan. I mean, I know the AT-AT walkers because they attack in California." Professor Shawson said, "Boba Fett is one of the most feared bounty hunters in that universe. He's also a genetic clone of his father, Jango Fett, who is also a bounty hunter. Boba took his place after he... Anyway, we have to somehow lure Boba into that multiverse machine and take him back to his world." In police station, Mr. Downing and Rick walking down the corridor. Rick said, "My plan was perfect until it's messed up." Mr. Downing asked, "What do you mean?" Rick answered, "We were trying to save the city from the bomb, and that robot Snake is clearly an alien, which makes him responsible for that bomb. That's why Repty is a dangerous alien." Mr. Downing replied, "I think Professor Shawson is examining Repty. He saved us from the bomb. Repty is not dangerous, and besides, his technology could be of great value to us." Rick said, "Maybe. Then my department will dismantle that snake as soon as we learn." Mr. Downing said, "Repty is no security threat, so you have no jurisdiction on that section." Rick said, "Don't be too sure about that." So Neil, Repty, Cypher and Holly took a stroll in the woods. Neil commented, "The same place where we fight Kevnock, why not?" Cypher asked, "What we're doing?" "We can't kill Boba Fett, as he's got a big part in the franchise." Repty said, "I can set my lasers to stun, so we can bring him into the lab, no problem." Neil said, "But be very careful. He's a bounty hunter. They're very dangerous and hard to catch." Meanwhile, at the lab, Mr. Downing said to Professor Shawson, "Be careful, because Officer Rick is after Repty, despite that he has no authority." Shawson replied, "Well, strangely, right now, he's not the only one looking for Repty. We just had a visit from Boba Fett, the bounty hunter from Star Wars World." Mr. Downing asked, "What about my daughter, Holly? Where is she?" Shawson replied, "Oh no, her and the others got away. I don't know where specifically." Mr. Downing said, "Are you joking? My daughter is possibly followed by that trigger-happy bounty hunter from a classic movie world. I need to find her. You better hope she's okay. I can't lose her again." Meanwhile, Neil, Repty, Holly and Cypher are still walking around the woods. Cypher asked, "How long since planet Earth has been invaded?" Holly said, "Who knows, darling?" Neil said, "Since 1963, apparently. The first time it was more discovered was since zombies attack in London and a bright light burned them up." Suddenly, Boba Fett landed on the ground in front of the gang. So Neil and Cypher threw punches on Boba, but he knocked both of them down with his fists. So then he pulled out a blaster and shoots while the whole gang dodges, but then Boba shot a white rope from his wrist and wrapped around Repty, so then he flew off with him. Holly asked, "Great, what do we do?" Neil replied, "I think I have an idea where he's taking Repty." Mr. Downing is driving in his police car looking for Holly, so then he sees a black car driving past, and noticing Holly was in there, so he quickly turned around and driving the same direction that car is heading to. Boba Fett had brought Repty inside the lab, and Professor Shawson asked, "Repty, where is everyone? Officer Downing is looking for his daughter." Repty said, "They're in that woods where we fought Kevnock. They're fine." Boba Fett said, "But you won't be, as soon as I take you to Jabba's palace." Professor Shawson said, Repty is not a criminal. He hasn't been to your world. So Neil, Holly and Cypher burst in. Neil said, Repty is innocent. This is what portals do in nature. Mr. Downing came in and asked, Holly, are you okay? Holly replied, Yes, I'm fine, Dad. Repty fired the lasers from his eyes to the rope, which broke. Repty is free. So Boba Fett raised his blaster. Then Mr. Downing punched Boba into the laser beam. Professor Shawson switched the multiverse manipulator off and said, Thank you, you just helped us return Boba Fett to his world. Neil asked, How come he didn't burn his rope earlier? Repty answered, Because I know where he was going. I thought it was an easier way to lure Boba here safely. Professor Shawson said, Well done, Repty, and to all of you, we've saved the world again. Mr. Downing said, Professor Alice, Shawson, I will inform you that Repty may be alien presence, so I'm giving you responsibility. So you are officially the team. Make sure you keep my daughter safe. That includes you, Cypher. So everyone is happy. Mr. Downing said, I'm taking a day off. So Holly, Cypher, do you guys fancy a lift?